Good afternoon, Vinyl community. Bradley here. Today's video will probably be called A Classical Masterpiece or subtitled I Don't Know Squat. Actually, I think both of those statements would be true. I don't know squat about classical music. I have some classical music, but it's a lot of times I don't know what I want. It's really hard for me. I do have a decent amount of Bach, but I want to branch out a little bit. So I came across this symphony, and it's kind of like if somebody I know that's not into jazz and they say, hey, I've discovered this really cool album that I like. And I would say, well, what is it? And they would say, Kind of Blue by Miles Davis, maybe? And I would go, yeah, that's a good choice. That's how I feel about this album. What I'm talking about is, the symphony is called The Planets. It's by Gustav Holst, an English composer. This version here is by the Boston Symphony Orchestra, conducted by William Steinberg. This was recorded in 1971, and it has been reissued. It's on Deutsche Grammophon. So this work, which I'll briefly tell you about, Gustav Holst. He was born in 1874, died in 1934, and he wrote this symphony he started in 1914 and finished it in 1917. So it was during World War I. And he actually tried to join the English army, but he was like 40 years old and really he wasn't in shape or good health. So they told him, thanks, but no thanks. Just go back to writing music or something. So, which he did, and he finished it. He was into astrology and horoscopes, you know. So I'm sure that's where he got the idea for this, although he said it did not have any bearing on the music, actually. Now, when I first heard this, I kind of stumbled across it by accident, you know. It's like any classical music fan would know this record, or this symphony, I'm sure. But when I first heard it, I thought Star Wars, which this was written like 60 years before John Williams wrote Star Wars soundtrack. And in fact, when George Lucas was filming Star Wars, he hired John Williams to write the soundtrack for Star Wars. And he told Williams that he kind of wanted the music to sound like something like this. So John Williams went out and made music maybe that sounded a little bit like that. Which is great. Star Wars music is fantastic. One nice thing I like about this album, which I will explain, the different movements in this symphony, they are named after the planets. So there are 7 movements. Earth is not included, nor is Pluto. Because at the time, Pluto hadn't even been discovered. Well, nowadays, they said it's not a planet anyhow. So he was correct in his planets. It does not include Earth, but all the other 7 planets it does. And one nice thing about this is the names of the movements are named after the planets, of course. So instead of having like the second movement in C sharp minor as the title, maybe it will be called Venus. Very easy to remember, especially for someone like me. So I'll just go over these movements very quickly. The first movement is Mars, the bringer of war, which is described as brutality. This would be similar to that Star Wars theme. You have the marching when the opposing forces are gonna battle, you know. It just screams out Star Wars, big time. The second movement is Venus, which is the bringer of peace, also known as serenity. Beautiful, beautiful piece. It is very serene. I love it. Third movement is Mercury, the winged messenger, also known as quicksilver speed. To me, it sounds kind of playful, kind of quick-paced, gives you impression that things are going good, you know, that kind of a overall feel. And these movements, they're really nice because they give you the full range. Some really aggressive and some just very peaceful. So the fourth movement is Jupiter, which Jupiter may be my favorite, I don't know. Mars is very good. But Jupiter is the bringer of jollity, which is also humor. This screams out Star Wars. And a lot of this music, I'm sure it was used as a blueprint for soundtrack composers for movies like epic westerns in the 40s and 50s. You know, you would hear some of this music in those movies, this type of music. So Jupiter kind of it's celebratory, kind of like if you had a wagon train. They were fighting the Indians and the bad weather, then they get to the top of the mountain and look down and there's nothing but green, lush valley for as far as the eye can see. It's that type of movement. The fifth movement is Saturn, the bringer of old age, also described as calm, very peaceful. This, along with Venus, are the more serene tracks or movements. The sixth planet movement would be Uranus, the magician. This kind of screams out Star Wars again. I hear a little danger in here. You know, you can kind of figure out what parts of movies this type of music would be played in. And then the last planet is Neptune, the mystic, also described as hypnotic. And that's a very good description. That's the last movement, and it's a perfect way to end this symphony. A few months ago, I was talking about, I really like Shelly Manne, the jazz drummer, and he made an album in the early 60s on Impulse called 234. And I said that the sound on that album, just the sound of it, is my favorite sounding jazz. And so far with classical music, this would be kind of like the sound I was maybe searching for. I don't know. Like I said, I'm just getting into jazz. Now there's many versions of orchestras and conductors that recorded the planets. If you go on Amazon, there'll probably be quite a few. This one is very, very good. Sounds excellent. Good musicianship. The first time I actually heard it, it was on YouTube, and basically you just search for Holst, Holst, and then the planets, space, the planets. And I think maybe the first thing that will pop up is the Complete Symphony. And I think that version is done by the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. So that was actually the first one I heard, but I could not find that version on vinyl, and actually on CD it was a little, it's out there, but it's a little hard to find on CD. But either one of those versions sound really good to me. So, like I said, I don't know too much about classical music, but I like this. So, that's today's record. I will show you the label for Deutsche Grammophon. They kind of change it. This must be every once in a while. I don't know what you call it. The tulip crown. Oh, can't even get it there. Oh well. There we go. But Deutsche Grammophon, you can't go wrong with their pressings and their recordings. They've got a huge, well, that's pretty much what they do, is classical music. So I guess that's it for today. I hope everybody has a good rest of the week and a really enjoyable weekend. So I will catch you later. So have a good one.